Okay, so you wanted to do a deep dive on this India's union budget for 2025.
Yeah.
And we've got two sources here that seem to break down all the major points.
Yeah, they really highlight all the key components, I think.
Cool, yeah. So I thought the first thing that that stood out to me was the tax relief
Oh, yeah.
for the middle class.
Big news.
Big news, yeah. So the income tax exemption threshold is now 12 lakh rupees.
Yeah, that's pretty substantial. I think a lot of people are pretty excited about that.
Right.
That translates to significant potential savings for a lot of households.
Right.
And a lot of economists are thinking that this will have a pretty significant impact on consumer spending.
Yeah, could definitely boost some industries too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, think about things like travel, entertainment, even durable goods could see a real uptick.
So that's interesting, but I mean, is there a downside to all this extra cash floating around? I mean, like, could it trigger some inflation?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think the government's kind of banking on the idea that increased production and some of these supply side reforms that they've got in the works are going to keep inflation under control. But, it's a tough balancing act.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, let's talk about the agriculture sector for a sec.
Okay.
So the budget mentions these two major initiatives. The Prime Minister Dhan-Dhaanya Krishi Yojana, which is targeting 100 districts.
Right.
And I think something like 1.7 crore farmers. And then there's this other thing, this 6-year mission to make India self-reliant when it comes to pulses.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Food security is obviously a huge priority for any country. And this is really about, reducing their dependence on imports.
Makes sense.
And it's not just about like producing more food, it's about empowering the farmers themselves, particularly in those 100 districts that they're targeting with the Dhan-Dhaanya scheme. Those are areas that have historically struggled. So they're really focusing on things like improving infrastructure, technology adoption, making sure farmers have access to credit.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about this this whole pulse thing? I mean, what's the game plan there? Why pulses?
Well, I mean, pulses are a staple in the Indian diet, but right now they have to import a pretty significant amount of what they consume.
Oh.
So this 6-year mission is really all about, closing that gap. And they're doing it by, investing in research
Cool.
to develop, higher yielding varieties of pulses. They're promoting better farming practices, and they're even providing incentives to farmers to encourage them to grow more pulses.
Interesting. So basically thinking long-term.
Yeah, exactly.
More sustainable food system.
Exactly.
Cool.
Oh.
Okay, so let's shift gears again. There's a lot of emphasis in the budget on research and innovation, especially in technology.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
They're allocating a ton of money, like 20,000 crore, to these private sector-driven initiatives. And then there's this PM Research Fellowship thing.
Yeah, this is all about really, trying to foster a knowledge-based economy.
Good.
And it's not just any research. They're really focused on like the cutting edge stuff.
Right.
Artificial intelligence, biotechnology, renewable energy, even space exploration. They really want to see made in India solutions to these global challenges.
Yeah. And it seems like that PM Research Fellowship is specifically about, building up the talent pool.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of modeled after these really prestigious international fellowship programs.
Oh.
And it offers like really generous funding and mentorship to these really exceptional young researchers. They really want to attract the best and the brightest to India and give them the resources to really make breakthroughs.
That's awesome. Okay, so speaking of made in India, the budget also has a lot to say about electronics and the whole electric vehicle sector. They're talking about exemptions for components for LED and LCD TVs.
Right.
And then lithium-ion batteries, which are obviously essential for phones and electric vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really strategic move, I think. By making it cheaper to produce these key components, they're hoping to attract a lot more electronics manufacturing to India,
Right.
Which would create jobs, boost exports, and potentially even make these products more affordable for Indian consumers.
So more manufacturing means more energy? So is that why they're putting so much emphasis on nuclear power?
You got it, yeah. So the budget actually sets aside a whopping 20,000 crore for this nuclear energy mission, with the goal of having 5 new indigenous reactors up and running by 2033.
And they're really focused on these small modular reactors?
Yeah.
What's the big deal with those?
Well, SMRs have some pretty big advantages over these traditional nuclear power plants.
Okay.
For one thing, they're smaller, so you have a lot more flexibility in terms of where you can put them. They're also designed with enhanced safety features and generally considered more cost-effective.
So easier to scale up.
Exactly.
Okay. But I mean, what about the whole issue of nuclear waste? I mean, that's a big concern, right? And this whole plan is going to be super expensive.
Yeah, I mean, those are definitely valid concerns, and the government knows it. They're actually putting a good chunk of change into research
Oh,
to find safer and more sustainable ways to deal with nuclear waste. And as far as the cost goes, yeah, it's a big upfront investment.
right.
But they're arguing that in the long run, the benefits in terms of energy security and reduced emissions are going to outweigh the costs.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, so with all this spending going on,
Mm.
what about the government's finances? I mean, can they afford all this?
Well, they've set a fiscal deficit target of 4.4%, which is basically a way of signaling to the markets that they're serious about fiscal responsibility.
Okay.
But at the same time, they're also increasing capital expenditure, which is basically the money they spend on things like infrastructure, to a record euro 11.21 lakh crore.
So it's kind of a balancing act.
Oh, yeah. It's a classic balancing act. You know, invest in growth, but keep spending under control. It's something that governments all over the world are wrestling with.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so last but not least, let's talk about the gig economy.
Okay.
The budget has some plans to kind of formalize gig work
Right.
and give these workers access to things like healthcare and Social Security.
Yeah, I mean, the gig economy is exploding everywhere.
For sure.
India is no exception. But a lot of these workers, they don't have the same kind of protections and benefits as people in traditional jobs.
Right.
So this is about trying to, extend those safety nets.
But isn't there a risk that, too much regulation could kind of stifle innovation in the gig economy?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it's something the government's going to have to think carefully about.
Right.
How do you find that balance between protecting workers and preserving the kind of flexibility and dynamism that makes the gig economy so attractive?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Okay, so overall, it seems like this budget is really focused on the future.
Mm.
Investing in growth, innovation, and inclusivity.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. It's a bold vision for sure.
Yeah.
But it remains to be seen how all of these policies are actually going to play out in the real world.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see how it all unfolds.
Absolutely. If you want to learn more about the budget, you can find the full document at indiabudget.gov.in. Yeah, definitely worth a look.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time.
See ya.